All right, everybody, we're back with another episode of Strange Appalachia. Tonight's episode is going to be kind of a mystery in the Southwest Virginia, up into Kentucky, and actually over into Tennessee area. It's going to cover the Swift Silver Mine. Um, so the basis of the story is that there was a guy named Jonathan Swift, and he actually supposedly killed a bear or shot a bear and it wounded it, and he followed it to a cave and found a seam of silver in the cave. Um, and then from there, the legend goes about 10 different directions. And also tonight, we have a special guest. We've had him on the show once before. That's Joshua Bolling, and he's going to give us some insight into this legend, something different than me and JD usually put into it. And Josh is actually a geologist, so he has a better understanding of rocks than I would say most people do. So he can give us an idea of about the silver mine. If you want to go ahead and introduce yourself, Josh.
Hey guys, yeah, thanks for having me on this week. Once again, yeah, my name is Joshua Bolling. I've been a professional geologist for close to 20 years now. Uh, I grew up in Big Stone Gap, same as Charlie and JD here. I went to school in Radford, so I'm pretty well versed in the Appalachian Mountains and geology. So yeah, we've looked into a lot of this. I've done some research too, and I'm ready to dive into this and explore it a little bit.
Cool. So JD, you got anything before we get started in this mystery?
No, just wanted to echo the what you said about the backstory there leading into it, where it goes in about 75 different ways. Actually, the start of it goes about 75 different ways because I saw a couple of different things other than the bear story. So definitely interested to hear what Josh has to say about the geology side of this story and go from there.
Yes, I'd like to kind of start. When I was growing up, my dad always talked about John Swift or Jonathan Swift's silver mine, and he would also often say, "I've got a copy of his journal and this and that." And my dad was a storyteller, so he would, he talked about it a little bit more in passing. I don't think he ever went out and looked for it. So it just so happened about a week ago, I stumbled across his copy of what he had, and it's actually a book written by Michael Henson in 1975. And it basically starts out with about a 17-page manuscript of quote unquote John Swift's manuscript journal, which we'll get into that. And it ends with him doing a lot of individual research, talking about, you know, you're right, it goes in so many different ways, but he basically does research on somebody said this was in this news article, somebody said they found some silver here, and it goes in so many different directions. So I've read through it and a bunch of other stuff, and I don't want to spoil it, but when you read, and apparently there's no original copy of Jonathan Swift's journal. Uh, Even the one that was published originally was a copy, and the journal that I have starts out the words. It says, "I was born October 3rd, 1712, in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania," and that in itself, I think, is an issue because who's going to start their journal out like that? This is basically a manuscript telling, here's my mind. And there's also a lot of conflicting information about where he was born. Was he born in England? Was he born in the United States? There's a lot of discrepancies here, and at the end, I'll kind of wrap up what I think happened. So, Charlie, you mentioned that he was originally shot a bear and found a cave. That's not what this manuscript actually says.
Mm.
It starts out saying that basically he joined General Braddock in the attack on Fort Duquesne. I'm probably butchering this, in the forks of the Ohio Valley, which were defeated. He befriended a person named Munday, Munday, George Munday.
Yeah, he was a
Now, at some
Frenchman.
point, yeah, at some point earlier before that, George Munday was actually captured by the Shawnee or the Pawnee, an Indian group. And once again, the counts here vary. That apparently before he was brought back to that group, another Indian group uh, battled the Indian group he was with, and he was captured again. He was later befriended by that tribe and brought into them, and that's when they took him to their silver mine. And so years later, He apparently left the tribe, went to Alexandria, Virginia, where John Swift lived. They befriended him, and that's when he said, "Hey, I know where silver mine's at. Let's go mine it." And there's a lot of really sketchy stuff. John Swift and this guy was reaching out to people down in Cuba who had mining expertise. That's just weird. Who would reach down to Cuba in the 1700s when there's probably people closer that would actually know stuff? So I just think that's really way out there. And he also, they hire a bunch of other people, and they quote unquote swore them to secrecy. And some of them died apparently through Indian attacks. Actually, I think there was a duel, and one person died from the duel. A lot of sketchy things, but most people know only two people can keep a secret if one of them's dead, right? Is that saying goes? So
Yes.
the fact that all this is out there, and so many people knew about it, it was never found again, I think it's wild. And so here's a short version of what happened. So he mined it, I think, from 17. Actually, a quick history about John Swift, right? So he was apparently born in England or in Philadelphia. It's two different things. And he was a sailor up until he was about 40 years old. So he left being a captain in 1752. And he did some trading with the Cherokee, Tennessee, and North Carolina. And he also, in around 1755, apparently became a silversmith. To me, that's also, we'll get to at the end, I think it's very suspect. And that's when he befriended that person. And in 1760, I think, is when he went to the mine. The guy led him to the mine. And they mined it off and on for almost 10 years. I think they made like 6 or 7 trips to it. And they would bury some of the treasure. I say treasure. They would bury some of the silver to come get it later because their horses couldn't carry it. Now, this is back. You got to think America wasn't even America yet. And so they refer to it as Tennessee, West Virginia, Kentucky, North Carolina area, Virginia. And they do mention a lot of places by name. They mentioned Fort Pitt, which eventually became Pittsburgh. They did mention Bean Station, which is close to us in Tennessee, around the Morristown area. And there's so much other stuff later that is all over the place. Almost like every county in Kentucky is mentioned. Even one place mentions that the mine is 12 miles away from Powell Valley. So really all over the place. And so after about 10 years, the story goes that John Swift wanted some more capital and investors to really open up the mine into a larger operation. And he went back to England. Now, he was arrested and jailed for about 10 to 15 years. All this is allegedly. So, and he was either jailed for bad mouthing the throne, because he was like pro colonies. And he was like, America needs to be either standalone. He was either jailed for being pro colonies and against the throne, or it's highly possible he was arrested for counterfeiting coins, which I want to get to as we wrap this up. And he started going blind in prison, and he was there for about 15 years, and he returned back to the colonies. And I think he was completely blind at that point. But he had left his manuscript, this directions and the journal, as you will, with a friend in Bean Station. Now, it varies who that friend was. So he met it back up with his friend, and they tried to find the mine. Him being blind, he just could not find it. And so that has led to 200 plus years now of people trying to find his mine. So that's kind of where I'm coming from, what I've read, and there seems to be a lot of stories, all the different ones I've seen online, not just from this book I read. There's a lot. Yeah. So that's it in a nutshell. Now we can look at the geology side of it. Should you input of what I just said?
Well, let's see. I'm gonna throw a quote out there real quick too. Chief Binge, who is the largest mass murderer in Southwest Virginia history, was also he was half Cherokee, half English. He said, he had a quote that said, "If the white man knew what I knew, he would shoe his horses in silver because it would be cheaper than iron." And so that's kind of thrown into it.
I did see that. I told you in this book he has a lot of references and small little blurbs. That was actually, I don't think it was mentioned by name If he did that, I didn't see Benji stick out, but that's also mentioned in this manuscript.
Yeah, the story is so varied and wild as to even where this mine is. Kentucky seems to be kind of a center of it, but it's also, Stone Mountain, up there in Big Stone. Clintwood actually is another place that it's listed. It's really varied as to where the mine is supposed to be. And one of the things I read actually said that there was more than one mine, that when he was exploring around the area of his first mine, he found a second, more profitable mine, and that's the one he actually mined. And as far as him being a counterfeiter, there was a story that his counterfeit money was actually worth more than the regular money because it had a higher silver content. And he was actually caught by a detective or some type of an official, and he made the official start mining the silver with him, trying to get him to be implicated in the crime so that he wouldn't turn him in. So
I want to talk.
There's a million different stories.
Exactly. I want to talk a little bit about basic geology for a minute, especially in the Appalachian region. So we have the Blue Ridge Mountains. The Blue Ridge Mountains were rocks formed deep underground with a lot of heat and pressure, and it's been thrust faulted up and eroded down. So the Blue Ridge itself was a mountain building event. And then to the east of that, you have the Piedmont, which is really old granitic type rocks. Then you have the coastal plain, which goes out to the ocean. Now, to the west of the Blue Ridge, you have the Valiant Ridge, which was old sedimentary rock, which was eventually laid down in an old sea and formed like limestone, sandstone shale. That was laid down flat and later thrusted up. And that's how we get our Valiant Ridge province, which is most of the Appalachian mountain ranges. That's what you get around Big Stone. And then to the west of that, you hit the Appalachian Plateaus, which once again are horizontal flat-lying rocks that have been eroded away, and you get like what's called a dissected upland. So out of all of those provinces, the ones that you're most likely to get any type of precious metal in would be the Blue Ridge or the Piedmont, because they form in very high temperature, pressure, magmatic type environments. Everything from the Valiant Ridge and the Appalachian Plateaus are sedimentary rocks, which are laid down by eroded materials and then re-cemented together. Now, most of what I've read places the mine in Kentucky, which to me is a big flag. Now, I want to say I think there might be a mine somewhere. I do not believe it's in Kentucky. If there is any type of silver, it's going to be, I think, in the Blue Ridge or the Piedmont areas. So there's a chance it could be up in Pennsylvania, North Carolina. I don't think it's in Kentucky. Now, there is, I want to say I think it was the Kentucky State Geological Survey said, we have found a couple small deposits of silver, but it's very rare, and it wasn't a lot, especially not to make this giant mine that they're talking about. And let me back up a second. Most of your silver doesn't really come, especially in the United States, is not just, hey, I'm mining silver ore. It's like you just don't find, oh, here's a big chunk of silver. It's usually in very small crystalline structures that have to be kind of ground up, and there's different processes to like smelting and or like an electrolysis that you can put it through to pull the silver out. Now, most of the time, and I think like 80% of the silver that's mined is a byproduct of mining for gold, lead, and zinc. And so you just don't find, hey, here's a big chunk of silver. You do in other parts of the world, but maybe one or two places in the United States, maybe like, I think it's like Idaho and up there, nowhere close to us. And we just don't have the silver forming environments. Now, I'm an environmental geologist, and I do soil testing across North America. And I test a lot for what's called the RECR metals, Resource Conservation and Recovery Act. And one of those 8 metals is silver and selenium. Those 2 metals, I rarely ever even get detections. And so that just shows you that you just don't stumble across silver. It's not something that's really readily out there like the other 6. So that puts a
Well,
big flag up, I think, about Kentucky.
well, let me ask you a question then, real quick. Is there anything that can be confused with silver?
Uh, there is an ore called galena. Uh, it's a lead sulfide. It's very metallic. I could see how people could think that could be silver just by looking at it to the naked eye. But I don't think you can really smelt that into any type of coin. Now, if he was actually smelting this stuff and getting all the silver he thought, maybe he was. Now, there is a lot of iron ore and lead sulfide in Kentucky, but I don't think there's any straight up silver. And the way that's been described is, these thick veins and how readily plentiful it was. But, it could be possible to get a little bit out of the iron ore and lead sulfides.
So there's no chance that he got something confused, maybe. I mean, the whole story, the more and more you read into it, the more suspect it becomes.
Yeah, I don't think there's really anything that he could mistake it for and be able to go to the smelt, because they apparently had 2 or 3 smelting furnaces in their quote unquote camp. And I want to throw this out there because I don't know if I'll get around to it later, sooner or later. But about 10 years ago, there was a millionaire who out in the Rocky Mountains buried a chest of $2 million worth of gold bullion, or just gold treasure. And he put out a poem kind of describing where it was at. It took 10 years for somebody to find that. And I think 4 people actually died looking for it. So Here we have a journal that actually even lists latitude, longitude coordinates, which puts you like in Cumberland, Kentucky. And we're over 200 years into it, nobody can find it. So, I mean, in this day and age, with how much prospecting has been done, all the geological surveys, me myself, I've been out in the fields, walking through mountains, mapping rock outcrops. And, students all across the country are doing grad projects and field methods projects. I would be absolutely surprised. Somebody should have came across it by now, more or less. And the fact that they say a cave, also, I think that's suspect too, because yes, there's caves all throughout Kentucky. Kentucky's known for caves because of the limestone and the sedimentary rocks. And it's just extremely odd to me to find a vein so rich going through a sedimentary rock that happens to have a cave there. So it's all, I think, just way out there.
Yeah.
So
I know.
just to throw this out, this sort of I guess a spoiler for next week or a tease for the next episode. But you mentioned Cumberland, Kentucky there. One of the things that area is known for is the tunnel that goes through Cumberland Gap. And so while I was researching this, there was a lot of really weird stories that cropped up about the Cumberland Gap. So I think or the tunnel specifically goes through Cumberland Gap. So just as a tease for our next episode, we're definitely going to be talking about the Cumberland Gap Tunnel.
And people have put a lot of effort into this because there were some hand-drawn maps, and people have tried to match those maps up. And I think this book actually says if you flip the map upside down, it matches some place, I think in Morgan County, Kentucky. I mean, it goes on. People think it's in Coburn, thinks it's in Norton, Virginia. It's just people just think it's all over the place, but there's really nothing geologically to say yes, there would be some silver here. I mean, I do know there was some iron ore, I think, mined at Big Stone Gap, which you might have gotten a little bit of byproduct, which I'm not really sure how that chemistry works. But then also they talk about going through gaps, right? So you got Pennington Gap, Big Stone Gap, Cumberland Gap, Shelby Gap, and I think you got to think Christopher Columbus thought he was going to India or something when he landed in America.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he thought he was
taking
a shortcut.
And they could have been in, I think Pennsylvania, thinking they were in Kentucky back then. It wasn't chartered land, and so who knows? So yeah, it's all over the place. Geologically, I think it's highly unlikely that he found a load just to here's silver without having to break it up and do all the processes and stumbling across it. As a geologist, I don't buy it. So that's my professional opinion on that.
Yeah, I know with everything that I've researched, one of the researchers or one of the journal entries that I read said something about following a river and finding a set of natural staircases, you know, and they would lead you right to the mine. And so, how often do you see those natural staircases? What does that even mean?
And somebody, I came across one of those readings where somebody thinks he actually found it. It was published in a journal. He had pictures of the natural, all these descriptions the guy wrote in his journal. Like it's like almost like a natural bridge here. There was a rock chimney looking thing here, and people think they find that, and they just think, oh, here it is, but there's no link to it. But to to kind of go toward what I've hinted at a few times, and a lot of people think this too, is he was basically maybe a con man. He was somehow getting silver and counterfeiting money. What doesn't make sense, if he lived in Alexandria, Virginia, why was he going so far inland, to quote unquote have this mine? Or was it a ruse, kind of like a sleight of hand, right? He's telling everybody, I'm going over here to Kentucky to do this mining stuff, when actually he probably went 50 miles one direction and was doing his illegal operation. I don't know. Nobody knows. Just all the things doesn't really fall in place, and all the people who went with him originally to mine this place, you would think they'd have told somebody who had told somebody, but yeah, nobody knows. So I think if anything, he was arrested. He was a criminal. Like I said, I think he was probably arrested for the counterfeiting. Some people think he was pirating ships, stealing the silver and reworking it, but who knows?
Yeah.
I just think the mine itself is not real.
Yeah, I don't even think that he was an actual person. I think it was an alias. There was actually a writer named Jonathan Swift, and I always thought it was really weird that this guy's name matched a very popular writer. That's kind of a weird thing.
And another thing I came across is one person said, I bought this tract of land back in I think it was like 1800-ish, and I bought it from John Swift, or even on I think on the paper it said this piece of property was mined by John Swift, something like that. Which is like, oh, that's kind of legit. It puts legitimacy to the story. But what's odd is that like 6 years later, I think the guy sold it back to him, or the guy died penniless. I've read different things. But if he sold it back to him, which I think somebody said they found that property deed that he was sold back to John Swift, that would have put John Swift at 113 years old. So that instead of giving it credibility, I think it takes some away.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, the chances of him making it to 113 was pretty rare.
Especially in the 1700s and already being blind by 1780.
Yeah.
So
yeah, it's
there's a lot of fascinating geology. I mean, I could be missing something. There's been, I think, at least three different mountain building episodes around us over the past 500 million years or so. So there could be strange things happen. There are something called pegmatites, which are very they're basically kind of like a volcanic shoot that just kind of comes out of the ground. But they're usually rich in minerals. I mean, there's a slim chance that he stumbled across a pegmatite full of gold and silver ore, or just silver ore, which most likely would have found gold. But if he found gold, he'd probably been all over that too. So, I mean, there are possibilities. People still look for it. I just don't think it's really out there to find.
Yeah, I know one of the guys that's one of our Bigfoot buddies. He talked about it one time. Just a short little post he had made about it, but he had said something about the mountain behind his house having a silver mine on it. And JD, didn't you say there was a similar story up in Gatlinburg? Weren't we talking about that one day?
Yes, there's a similar. It's not really connected to the Swift silver mine, and I want to say that it might have been a gold mine instead of silver, but a very similar story, equally sketchy, equally even more sketchy than this one, because it didn't even have names associated with it or anything. It was just, hey, we found a gold mine in Gatlinburg.
No, I mean somebody found a gold mine in Gatlinburg.
Yeah.
Well, I will say. So North Carolina has probably some of the better stuff better minerals and stuff you'd find in the Blue Ridge. You can find rubies, sapphires, garnets, a lot of that stuff in North Carolina in the Blue Ridge. But I think in one portion of North Carolina, you can actually there's a gold-rich vein in the Blue Ridge. So it is possible because, Gatlinburg is very close to there. So there's a small possibility, but I wouldn't say it's a big vein of gold.
Well, like I said, just the backstory behind this one that I found was very sketchy. So
it could even be, the story that we just told with Jonathan Swift. Someone may have heard it and reworked it. I mean, it could be changed through hearsay. Yeah, as far as I can tell, the only person who really found gold in Gatlinburg is Dolly Parton.
Yeah, no kidding.
So.
Yeah, hopefully I didn't ramble on too much, but I mean, there's a lot. I mean, there's a lot I could go into about how you actually extract ore, and I'm not sure if they had that capability to do it that way back in the 1700s, especially in a very remote location that they had to cut a trail to with the tomahawk, right?
Yeah.
I do watch a lot of those gold rush shows, and they say they're always talking about the old timers and what they did back so long ago when it was just hand tools, and what they were able to accomplish is pretty fascinating. So I think that is possible, but to be in such a remote location and to work that place for almost a year at a time, that's got to be some pretty hefty. You got to bring in a lot of equipment or make a lot of equipment. I don't know. It's possible,
Yeah.
but I don't think it's likely.
There's a reason why whenever there's a mine like that, there's a town that springs up around it. I mean, you've got to have, people, and those people are going to make settlements. I mean, that's just the way it works. And that's also why there's so many ghost towns. Now those mines dry up or, become unmineable, it all goes away. So, yeah, I think this one's pretty much hearsay. I don't think it's a real thing, but it's a great legend. It's a really good story.
Yeah, and it fascinated I have all these Appalachian mysteries. My dad was fascinated with it. He talked about it off and on, and he thought it was real. Just reading through some of this, he also had not just this book was copied. There's also like 3 or 4 different articles talking about from different sources, and he had copied this from somebody, but there's some people who made a couple notes and underlined things, circled things. So whoever he got this off of was definitely looking into it.
Yeah, it's a pretty interesting thing, man. Pretty interesting legend overall. I love it.
Yeah, I think my favorite part of the whole legend is your quote from Chief Binge. I always thought that was an interesting quote.
Well, supposedly one of his captives found a silver mine in the back of one of the caves there that he had him in as well. Now, could that story have been rolled into the Swift story? Or could it just been somebody who managed to escape and was like, oh yeah, they got gold up there, got silver up there.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's a good possibility too. Overall, there's no telling. I don't think it's real. I don't think it's an actual thing, but it's cool to get the geology on it, and hearing and getting it backed up that, it's probably not real.
Yeah, I was kind of always, Dad would talk about it when I was a kid, and I kind of found it fascinating. Like, how cool would it be to, be out trampling through the woods and come across an old silver mine? How fun would that be? But, as I went to college and started learning about how things actually work, I'm like, yeah, not so much.
Yeah.
But, like I said, there's a possibility of some silver here and there. Same thing with gold. Off the top of my head, I wouldn't expect to find any gold in Virginia or Tennessee or Kentucky, but there are a few spots where you do find gold. So, I'm not saying it's completely out there. It's a possibility.
Well, I know we're going to try to do an expedition at some point in time up on Stone Mountain, and by expedition I mean not a 3 or 4 day thing, like a day trip maybe up on the Stone Mountain to give it a look around. So that'll be a fun trip.
Yep.
No. Well, Josh, if you don't have anything else, go ahead, JD.
I was going to say, it sounds like we're all three in agreement that sort of like most of the other stories we talk about here, this one's probably in the category of it's a great story but not real.
Yep.
And even though we all think it's not real, it's fascinating how many people out there still look for it.
Absolutely.
So
Yeah.
I'm curious if anybody else has anything or any contradictory statements or anything they'd like to add. I'd be curious to hear it. So throw some comments down. If you've heard any of the John Swift legends that are a little bit different than what we've thrown out, curious to hear it. So I'd like some feedback to see what you think or where you think it might be.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. If there's anywhere we can go out and investigate, like I said, Stone Mountain, we've got some access to that, but there's so many other areas it could be in. If you got any access and you want us to come out and look for a silver mine on your property, I'd be happy to do that.
Indeed.
All right. Well, if there's nothing else, guys, I say we go ahead and wrap it up, JD.
All right. As always, we invite you to like and subscribe to our page if you like what you heard. Check us out on Facebook. We post a lot of updates there. And hopefully you're sticking around and hear our next episode about the Cumberland Gap Tunnel.
Hey, I want to throw a big thanks out there to Josh for jumping on here tonight, too.
Absolutely.
A lot of fun.
He's a
Hopefully I can
man.
come back sometime.
Yeah, anytime, man.
Resident geologist.
Everybody needs a geologist on staff, that's for sure.
Somebody's going to bring us some kind of legitimacy here.
Yeah. I mean, biology degree, that didn't help anything, right?
No, not at all. Not at all.
That's funny. All right, guys, take it easy. Thanks.
All right, see you.
Thanks for listening.